Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining. We are going to give folks just a couple of minutes to get in the meeting, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody. So thank you for joining us today. My name is Sam, and I am the WACARES Fund Communications and Marketing Manager. I will be hosting today's presentation. Let's take a moment to meet our panel. Sebastian.
Good morning, everyone. Sebastian, I am the Outreach and Language Access Lead.
Good morning, Christine Kane, Provider Network Development Program Manager.
And Chantel.
Hi, good morning. Chantel Diaz. I use she, her pronouns, and I am also on the Provider Network development team.
Great. So today we will be having live interpretation in Chinese, Russian, Spanish, and Korean, and American Sign Language. If you would like to use our interpretation services, you can click on the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen and select the language. Our WalkHairs team is also here in the chat answering questions. You'll be able to answer questions at any point in the presentation using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. You can open that up and we will either answer your question live during the Q&A portion or somebody will respond to you in chat. This webinar will be recorded. The recording along with the slides will be available on our website at wacaresfund.wa.gov/webinars. The URL is at the bottom of your screen right here. And it will be available within 24 hours of the completion of the presentation. And now I'll pass it to Sebastian, who will start today's presentation by defining long-term care.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam, and thanks everyone for joining again this morning. So yeah, like Sam said, we'll start with sort of a definition of long-term care, get into some background and context around our long-term care system currently, and then speak to the program, and then, of course, more particularly on paid family caregiving. So starting with long-term care, we can think of it as help with activities of daily living, like bathing, eating, moving around, and managing medication. It doesn't include medical care, right? So things like doctor's visits and treatment for medical conditions. Long-term care isn't just for older people as well, so it can also help younger folks who have a disability, an injury, or maybe a severe illness. And a lot of folks maybe think long-term care means living in a nursing home, maybe, or an assisted living, but it can also include in-home care and other services. WalkCares covers in-home care and many other services, including home modifications and home delivered meals to help folks live at home as they age. In-home care can support mental and emotional well-being in addition to physical support. So a 2025 study showed that home care significantly reduced people receiving care's symptoms of depression. It also improved their quality of life and lowered their risk of loneliness. So with the right support, most people with long-term care needs can keep living independently in their own homes. It's also very common for family caregivers to not realize that they are, in fact, a caregiver, right? So you might, for example, go to your mom's house a couple of times a week to help with cooking meals, maybe drive her to appointments, and make sure she's taking her medications, all of which are common care activities. And the majority of this type of care is provided informally, as we'll talk about as well. So that's unpaid care from a family member. It could also be a friend or a neighbor. So before we get to Danny's story here, we do want to go ahead and just start a poll to get a sense of folks who have joined us today about your experience with long-term care and caregiving, and also how familiar you are with the WalkCares Fund. So if you join by computer or the Zoom app, if you could go ahead and answer those couple questions that come up and learn about who we all have here today. Yeah, I'm not sure. Usually, I'm not seeing the screen that usually pops up. So sorry about that. I think there might have been some technical issue with the poll, but we can, if folks, I see that we can do our sort of a thumbs up. If you all can give a thumbs up to if you have some experience with long-term care and caregiving, just to see. I imagine that many of us do, and I see lots of thumbs up there coming up. So yeah, lots of familiarity or lots of experience with caregiving. And we'll also talk about, of course, the What Cares Fund. So if you are familiar with the program already, you might learn a few new things. And if you're not familiar with the program, hopefully this will all be good information. So thank you all for that, and apologies for that poll. So we all have care stories, right? As we know in this group and beyond, right? In our families, in our communities. There are around 820,000 family caregivers in the state of Washington, which comes out to about 11% of the population, right? So it is a pretty significant portion of our population. So we're going to go ahead and share Danny's story here. Who is doing, right, the kind of from a Washingtonian, right, who would benefit from the type of services that Walk Cares will support. So let's take a look.
I'd really never seen anyone my age need long-term care until suddenly it happened to me. I was 30 at the time of my spinal cord injury. I've been a caregiver for 15 years. Long-term care insurance was not even anywhere in my mind. So about 4 years ago, I went into a doctor and they recommended a test. It's called a lumbar puncture. Everything went wrong that could have gone wrong. And I found out later on that I had a very complex spinal cord injury. There's a common misconception that just because you're disabled, you automatically can get disability benefits or you can automatically get Medicaid. But with my husband's income, and I have an income from being a caregiver, I won't qualify even if I drop my job. Walk Cares is probably the most hopeful program that I've ever seen Washington put out. Walk Cares is a very simple solution where only a little bit comes out of your paycheck, and you get this benefit of $36,500 that you can use to do what you need with where the gap exists. Life happens to all of us, and at any point in time, you could face a serious illness or an injury or a traumatic event that causes you to access the long-term care system. It's not just for people who are older, although it does definitely benefit them too. But at any point in time, you could need Walk Cares. Walk Cares is what I see really changing the future of long-term care.
All right. So a program like Walk Cares is needed because the way we have paid for long-term care up until now isn't working, right? So many of you shared that you have some experience with long-term care. So some of this information may be familiar to you all already. But we know that roughly 70% of us will need long-term care at some point in our lives, but most of us can't afford it. If we look at the cost of 20 hours of home care per week, For 6 months, that comes out to just over $23,000. And other types of long-term care are even more expensive. But the median household income just below that we see is, for Washington seniors specifically, is just 69,000 per year, right? So that cost of long-term care is a significant portion of that household income. And what ends up happening usually, right, is that family caregivers have to step in to fill that gap. And that can be with their own savings or by providing some of that unpaid care. And of course, that has an impact as well, right? So almost half report a related financial setback, and they spend on average 25% of their own income on those care expenses. Additionally, many have to leave the workforce early, right, to be able to provide that care. And caregivers 50 and older who do this lose on average more than $300,000 in wages and benefits combined. But the impact is broader as well, right? It affects our businesses and the economy more generally. So most caregivers who work or most caregivers work full time on top of their caregiving responsibilities, and 61% of them say that their care responsibilities have impacted their job in some way, right? So that could be having to come in late more often, leaving early, reducing their hours, maybe going down to part-time, or maybe having to quit entirely, right? Or retire early as well. And we also know when a working caregiver leaves their job that it can cost 1.5 times their salary to replace them. So how does the Walk Cares Fund work generally, right? So to earn benefits, you automatically contribute 0.58% of your paycheck during your working years. So you only contribute while you're working, meaning that if you retire, right, or if you become unemployed, those contributions stop. And everyone is covered at the same low rate regardless of pre-existing conditions. Starting in May of next year, folks will be able to apply for benefits, and you'll need to meet a contribution requirement and a care needs requirement as well, which we'll talk about next. Once you're approved, right, and have met both of those requirements, then you get to choose how you use your $36,500 benefit, which is a lifetime benefit. So that grows with inflation, right? So it's a lifetime benefit. And then you'll be able to choose, again, the covered services that you want, right, that best maybe meet your needs. And there are no out-of-pocket costs when you need care. So we pay the providers directly for the services that you receive with no copay or deductible. So I just mentioned the contribution requirements, right? These are the three pathways to be able to meet that contribution requirement. So everyone who is contributing to Walk Cares more than 500 hours per calendar year is earning benefits, including part-time and temporary workers. So we have there the permanent pathway to earn the full benefit amount by contributing at least 10 years. We have the temporary pathway, where someone who contributes 3 out of the last 6 years will be able to earn the full benefit amount at the time when they have a care need, right? And then there's the transition pathway which gives folks lifetime access to 10% of the full benefit amount for each year that they contribute if they were born before 1968. These folks who maybe qualify for the transition pathway can, of course, still qualify for the permanent or temporary pathways as well. So someone who works and contributes for 500 hours, at least 500 hours per year for 2 years, they would earn 20% of the full benefit amount, which is $7,300. Just to get a sense of what that 0.58% may look like over the course of someone's career, right? So if we just focus in on that middle column there in green, a typical worker in our state earns about $59,000 a year. So that person would contribute $29 per month. And over the course of 30 years, they would be contributing just over $10,000, right, total over, again, their 30-year career. And we often get the question around how much would someone need to make over their career, right? Let's say 30 years, in order for their contributions to exceed the benefit amount. And someone would have to make an average of $210,000, again, over the course of 30 years. And then we have the care needs requirement, right? So to use your benefit, we must determine that you need help with 3 or more activities of daily living and will continue to need help for at least 90 days. These activities are bathing, bed mobility, transferring, toileting, mobility, eating, and medication management. Additionally, if an applicant requires supervision with an activity of daily living due to cognitive impairment, so monitoring, queuing, or setup assistance, that counts as needing support with that activity of daily living. And that way, we ensure that our eligibility process captures not only frail individuals, but also people with cognitive impairment. So when you're ready to apply for benefits, you'll start by creating an online account. You can have someone else help manage your account as well. You can also access your local area agency on aging that will be available to help you if you need more support. So once you submit your application, we'll confirm that you've met the contribution requirement. Then you'll be able to schedule an appointment to talk about your care needs. And then after we meet with you, we'll let you know if you're approved to start using your benefit. And then once you've been approved, again, you can use your benefit to receive any of these covered services and supports from a WalkCares provider. So you may want to choose services to help you stay in your own home. That can be in-home care, home modifications, home delivered meals, or adaptive equipment and technology. But we also cover many services that support family caregivers. So you can get paid care from a loved one, including your spouse, or you can get respite care so that they can also take a break. We also cover education and consultation to help them manage your care, dementia and behavioral supports, and care transition coordination to support you when you leave a facility like a hospital. You can choose to receive services in your community. So it could be an adult family home or adult day services. Or you can choose to receive care in an assisted living facility or nursing home, including memory care. So you might be thinking how far the benefit will go. So for about a third of people needing care, or about a third of people need care for a year or less, right? So for those people, depending on the services that they choose, WalkCares may be able to cover all or most of their care need. For others, WalkCares can provide your family with some immediate relief and then also time, right, to plan for future care costs. So again, these are just some examples of how someone could use their benefit. I won't go through all of them for sake of time. Again, all these slides will be available on our website, so you can spend some more time looking at these in more detail. But let's say if you want to make your home more accessible, for example, to keep living there in your home independently, you could make home modifications, install a personal emergency response system, and get meals delivered for 3 years for just over $36,000. So benefits will become available for folks statewide next year, but we also wanted to share some key dates to be aware of. So before that statewide benefit rollout, we will be piloting our entire system in Lewis, Mason, Thurston, and Spokane counties with a limited number of applicants. Residents in those counties can begin their applications on January 6th. Then we have April 1st. Folks will be able to create an online account, which you can use to check your annual contribution statements and eventually apply for benefits. May 18th, applications for benefits will open statewide. And then again, July 1st of next year is when all beneficiaries across the state can start receiving services. And before we pass it off to learn more about paid family caregiving specifically, starting in July of next year, 2026, you can choose to continue participating in WalkCares if you leave the state. So to become an out-of-state participant, you must have contributed for at least 3 years, again, working at least 500 hours per year. and then you must opt in within a year of leaving Washington. So just like other workers, out-of-state participants will keep contributing to the fund during their working years. And the process for out-of-state participants to report their earnings and pay premiums is still being worked on. But of course, the focus is to make it as easy as possible for them to do that. And lastly here, just that those benefits for out-of-state participants will be available for them to access in July of 2030. And so I will hand it off from here.
Thank you, Sebastian, for the overview on the Walk Cares program. My name's Chantel, and I'm going to kick us off on the topic of becoming a paid family caregiver. So who can apply? It's pretty broad. Any family member who is related to you by blood, marriage, or adoption, and that also includes spouses and domestic partners. And for those of us who have maybe a chosen family, you could have another loved one become a caregiver for you, a loved one with some sort of formal relationship. But there would be some differences for that person as they go through training specifically. And then there are two employment options for a paid family caregiver. That caregiver could become an employee of the Consumer Direct Care Network of Washington, or they could become employed by a home care agency. Next slide, please.
Right. So we've got it in our Walk Care statute that beneficiaries be able to hire family members as individual providers. So the employer option I'm going to go over here is Consumer Direct Care Network of Washington, so CDWA. Some of you may be familiar with them. They have been partnered with DSHS for several years now, offering employer services to the state's IPs. And IPs are our in-home caregivers who provide care to Medicaid and other state-funded clients needing long-term in-home care. So CDWA will be a registered provider, again, so that beneficiaries can access their services and hire individual providers for their personal care. With CDWA, with WA Cares, because we don't create care plans for folks like you might have experienced over in Medicaid or other programs, we are going to encourage that beneficiaries complete a care agreement kind of on their own when hiring an IP through CDWA. So some sort of care agreement or contract, and the program will have a template agreement available to beneficiaries and their caregivers. The beneficiary in this employer model, they'll be the managing employer of the IP or of their caregiver. So their responsibilities will be to select who they want to hire. Again, whether that's a formal family member, formal relationship of a family member, someone in a chosen family, or not. Setting the schedule, assigning care tasks. Ideally, that would be through that care agreement I spoke to. Beneficiaries would also be responsible for dismissing or firing a caregiver if they're no longer needed or it's just not working out. If a beneficiary were to transition to Medicaid through maybe exhausting their benefit or change in circumstances, the family caregiver will be able to continue to be paid to provide care unless they're a spouse or registered domestic partner. So that provider type is not covered under Medicaid. And Consumer Direct Care Network Washington, CDWA, they will offer two different rates to beneficiaries. So there will be a standard rate that will include employee benefits such as healthcare and retirement, and unlimited hours, as determined by the beneficiary. So the beneficiary will be the one selecting and choosing how many hours of care they'll need based on their benefit amount and care needs. There'll also be a family rate available through CDWA, and that is going to exclude some of those benefits like healthcare and retirement. So it will be a lower rate, and it's applicable just to those who are related, a family or spouse or domestic partner. And there's like an hours limitation of under 20 weeks. So we're hoping to have that available by launch at the latest, if not pilot. Next slide, please.
Okay, so the alternative option for an employer outside of CDWA is the home care agency option, and the caregiver cannot be employed by just any home care agency. It has to be an agency that is registered with WaCares. So currently, registration is open. Providers are registering right now, and as they become qualified, they're going to be added to a searchable directory where a beneficiary and a potential caregiver can go and find what are the home care agencies in my local area that are registered with WaCares. And those would be the agencies that a caregiver could consider as a future employer. A little bit different from CDWA is that the caregiver is going to be supervised by the agency. So they are not an employer of their loved one, an employee of their loved one. All the tasks that are assigned to their caregiver are based on an agency created plan of care and then with direction from the beneficiary. And the plan of care is developed by an initial home visit by the agency where they determine what in-home care will look like based on that specific beneficiary's needs. And the beneficiary may also direct the caregiver to perform specific tasks outlined in the plan of care. They may also ask for assistance with ADLs and IADLs, so uh, uh, daily living tasks and instrumental activities of daily living. And that could be things like housework, picking up groceries, and various personal care tasks. When it comes to CDWA versus an agency, at the agency you work for, the hourly wages and frequency of pay, that's going to be determined by your agency. Also, the health insurance and other benefits for the caregiver will be determined by the employer. And some home care agencies have unionized staff and some do not. So there may be union status once you become an employee of a home care agency. And then finally, if the caregiver is unable to support the loved one when scheduled to do so, backup care may be available, and that backup caregiver would be another employee of the same home care agency. Next slide, please.
All right, so we're going to go through just kind of comparing, again, CDWA as an employer option to a home care agency option. So we've got a list here of some questions to consider when, as the beneficiary and the family member are, considering doing paid family caregiving and kind of looking at the options. So I'll just read through our questions and kind of go through what we've got here. So the first one, who will be my legal employer? So the legal employer of the family caregiver under our CDWA option would be CDWA, and same with the home care agency. So whoever that home care agency is that you're employed with is your legal employer. Who will be my supervisor? So we're kind of looking at this, like who's going to kind of manage my day-to-day. And so with CDWA, that would be the beneficiary. Again, they're selecting how many hours, what schedule works for them, the care tasks that need to be done, and when to dismiss or end services. With the home care agency, the family caregiver will be assigned an agency supervisor. And again, as Chantel had mentioned, there's going to be a care plan that's created by the agency, with the family caregiver and the beneficiary collaborating, but that will be the care plan that will need to be followed, and you would report to that agency supervisor. What will be my hourly wage, or what's my pay? And so we've got here currently on CDWA's hiring website, their starting wage for IPs is $22.52. So whatever that might be come program launch, that'll be the starting wage for IPs. And And then for home care agencies, that's set by the agency. So it'll depend on who you go with. Will I have workers' compensation coverage? Yes, under both options. Will I be paid for mileage if I use my car to take the beneficiary somewhere? And somewhere would have to be an approved, type of errand or task. Doctor's appointments, grocery shopping, banking, things like that. And yes, under both, you will be reimbursed for mileage related to the long-term care needs of the beneficiary. Will I have to fill out a timesheet? Yes, under both. Will I be offered health insurance? And under CDWA, so under their standard rate, health insurance is covered, and that's a yes. If you work full-time, it is required to be offered to full-time employees. There's a family rate, again, that's that reduced rate that's just for family members. And because there's the part-time aspect to it, and it's not included in the rate that beneficiaries would pay, it's not offered to that under that rate. And then under the home care agency, yes, again, you're required to be offered health insurance benefits if you're full-time and the agencies meet the criteria for offering. Next slide, please. All right, so will I have vacation time or holiday pay? Yes, under both. Would I get paid overtime if I work more than 40 hours? So for CDWA, it's a yes, although just the caveat with that family rate that it is under 20 hours. And so but if you do end up there's some sort of emergency or something and you're working over 40, yes, everyone is eligible for overtime. And same with home care agencies. Yes, you would get paid overtime. Will I get retirement benefits? So under CDWA, with that standard rate, yes, everyone would be vested after 6 months. Under the family rate, no. And for home care agencies, it depends on the agency and what type of benefit packages they offer. If I cannot work a shift, will there be a substitute caregiver? Under CDWA, no, there's not like a backup pool of providers. We'd encourage folks to kind of figure out if there's someone in their, natural circle that might be able to do that. CDWA does offer a service though, where, if you can plan ahead and you're going to be out or need coverage, you can work with them to find somebody, but not in that last minute, I'm calling out on a shift basically. And then as Chantel mentioned in her presentation on home care agencies, yes, if one is requested, hopefully the home care agency's got someone available and they can send out a substitute. Will I have to pass a background check? Yes, for both employer options. That is a statute requirement for our long-term care workers here. Could I work for more than one beneficiary or client? And that's a yes for both options. There are just some caveats to consider on, whether they're related or not and how much training you would need, things like that. But yes, you could. Next slide, please. All right, last bit of comparing here. How often will I be paid? So CDWA currently runs payroll every 2 weeks. And with the home care agency, it's going to depend on the agency. Is there a union? With CDWA, yes, there is. And again, as Chantel had mentioned, it depends on the agency. So some agencies are unionized, some are not. Depends on who's all registered with WACARES and who might be in your area. Will I have to pay taxes? Yes to both. If my family member transitions to Medicaid, can I still be their caregiver? So again, as I had mentioned, that's a yes, unless you're a spouse or domestic partner. And with the home care agency, that's a no. So the family caregiver at that time might want to consider employment options with CDWA or another caregiver within that same agency potentially, but Medicaid doesn't cover that under the home care agency option. And will I have a care plan to follow? So again, just kind of reiterating this information with CDWA, there will be an optional care agreement for folks to use with the IPs they hire. It's encouraged that they do that. And then with home care agencies, yes, as part of their licensing, and one of their requirements are to create care plans for all of their clients, so that you'll have that to follow if you go with the home care agency. Next slide.
All right. Thank you, Christine, for the side-by-side comparison of the employer options. Here are some things that will be required for both options. So whether you choose to be an employee of CDWA or an employee of a home care agency, at the time of application, you'll have to pass a name and date of birth background check. And then you will also have to complete 5 hours of online safety and orientation training. Once you're hired, you pass those things, you finish your safety and orientation, then you have 120 days from the first date of your employment to complete training. And here's where one other little split occurs. So if you are a family provider, so basically anything that's not spouse or domestic partner, your training is going to be 30 hours. If you are the spouse or domestic partner of the beneficiary or the person that you're providing care for, your training is going to be 16 hours. And as we had kind of alluded to earlier, that a person who's in your chosen family could become a provider for you as well, but there would be some differences. This is one place where those differences would come into play. And so if they do not if they are not a qualified relative, then they will need to complete at least complete 70 hours of training. That's the standard amount of training. Next slide, please. So there are some other supports and services that will be available through WACARES that are not paid family caregiving, but they could help kind of round out the care that the beneficiary is receiving. So the first example would be respite, and that is a temporary break in caregiving for paid or unpaid family caregivers. And that respite care could occur in the beneficiary's home, or it could occur in a residential facility, so outside of the person's home. Another option would be dementia support. And this is non-medical community-based support that is for both the beneficiary and their caregiver. The supports are intended to improve care for the beneficiary through a written strategy that is based on their identified behaviors. And to address those behaviors and promote optimal functioning, behaviorally specific interventions are designed and individualized for that person. Another type of support and an approved service is education and consultation. And that provides beneficiaries and their caregivers non-medical education, consultation, and some training regarding the beneficiary's diagnoses and chronic health issues. These services are intended to support the beneficiary to better manage their activities of daily living and their health and wellness. This includes services from medical and non-medical providers, but it also includes evidence-based programs like STAR-C, which is a standardized intervention to help family caregivers identify, reduce, and manage difficult behavioral symptoms of a relative with Alzheimer's disease. Housework and errands. This is support with cleaning, grocery shopping, getting to the bank, and, oh, just a moment, ran out of my notes here. And it would be, let's see, let me start over. Housework and errands is support with cleaning, grocery shopping, getting to the bank. And if you are being paid to provide personal care, these services are included in the rate the beneficiary is paying. So this would be more of a benefit to the unpaid family caregiver. And then finally, yard work and snow removal. This service relieves paid or unpaid family caregivers from having to do exterior maintenance like mowing and snow shoveling. Cleared pathways can help keep a beneficiary in their home safely and can also help them comply with any sort of city or HOA requirements that apply to the place where they live. Next slide, please.
All right, so to kind of tag on to all those great services Chantel outlined, we've got a few more here that are kind of outside the box supports for folks to consider or think about as they qualify for the benefit and kind of move into accessing services. So we've got adaptive equipment and technology. So some of the items or that might be purchased under here that can again assist the beneficiary maintain or regain independence, but also relieve some of the responsibilities of a paid or unpaid caregiver. So we've got things to consider like a handheld shower head, a portable bidet, dressing aids like a shoehorn or a sock aid, transfer poles, medication dispensers, and also telehealth support devices. So some things to consider again under adaptive equipment and technology. We've also got transportation services available, home delivered meals. We've got adult daycare services. And these, we really see as being able to free up a caregiver to maintain maybe they have outside employment or additional employment to the caregiving for our family caregivers to pursue tasks in their own personal life. So if you're not able to meet all transportation needs of your loved one, look at what type of services WalkCares can help with there for transportation, but also, to free up our family caregivers to focus on different aspects of care needs. So maybe you have someone who's really, needs some pretty heavy personal care, and that takes up a lot of your time. What kind of services might you be able to bring in to supplement and help? Again, back to those kind of housework and errands ones or home delivered meals to help relieve you of having to cook a meal one night. So just some additional, again, outside of the box supports for folks to consider as you kind of build your kind of wraparound services with the program. Next slide, please. Right, and so finally, just to kind of wrap up that focus on paid family caregiving, paid and unpaid family caregiving, we've got some resources listed out here. So of course, on our WalkCares Fund website, we've got a page dedicated to resources for family caregivers. There's the Dementia Action Collaborative that can offer great resources and supports to folks caring for folks with dementia. And of course, there are always those national associations that may benefit you and the loved one you're caring for. So there's like Alzheimer's, multiple sclerosis, heart disease associations, etc. DSHS under Home and Community Living Administration offers a family caregiver support program. So there's a link there. And of course, our local AAAs, our area agencies on aging, they're a great resource for services and supports for families. And then there's the Community Living Connections website. There's a Family Caregivers tab within there that can offer great resources and supports. And just another plug that is the website that our WalkCares provider directory is going to live in. So might be good to get familiar with that website. And then of course, if you do decide to become a paid provider through the Walk Cares Fund, your employer and your union can also be a source for resources and support as you do that work. Next slide.
Great, thanks, Christine. Now we will be moving on to the Q&A portion of the webinar. If you have a question, please add it using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And if all of the panelists could come on camera really quick for some of these questions. So the first question is there a place where you can find a sample care agreement?
So that is still in the works. We're working on getting final approval soon for our Walk Cares Care Agreement. It will be available by the pilot, so by January on our website.
Do family caregivers need to pay for training out of pocket?
No.
If someone uses a home care agency, will they take a portion of the benefits for administrative fees and overhead and things like that?
Could you repeat the question, Sam? Sorry.
If somebody uses a home care agency, will the home care agency take a portion of the benefits to pay for administrative costs and overhead?
Yes. So we're looking in Walk Cares with the home care agencies that register with us to follow this guideline of like an 80-20 type rule. So yes, there will be administrative fees because of course there are costs to running a business and providing oversight to caregivers and all the things that agencies and their services are able to offer. So there is an administrative fee that will go. Walk Cares is working on how to minimize that so that we can also ensure caregivers get good benefits and wage.
Are family members allowed to get the standard rate?
Yes. So the standard rate is available to anyone who wants to become an IP, whether related or not. So yes, not to overcomplicate the answer.
Sorry, that was way quicker than I thought. Will authorizations be available for the providers to view in Provider One?
There won't be authorizations in Provider One for family caregiver providers to view, if that's the question. So the way pre-authorizations will work will be between the beneficiary and the agency. And so if someone chose to go through CDWA, it would be between the beneficiary and CDWA to set up the pre-authorization for the hours and the services. And then the IP, the employee of CDWA would follow their standard payroll system in submitting a timesheet and getting paid.
How would I know if my mother qualifies for benefits that she can use to pay me to take care of her? Like, how do I know if my loved one is qualified?
Yeah, I can
Go
take
ahead, Sebastian. Mhm.
yeah, I can take that one. So yeah, I know went over the contribution requirements a little quicker, and I know there's a lot of information on there, but there's three pathways to meet the contribution requirements. And we mentioned the transition pathway, so that is for folks who were born before 1968. For each year that they contribute to the fund, at least 500 hours per year, then they earn 10% of the full benefit amount. So the example was someone who contributes for 2 years, right? Again, working at least 500 hours per calendar year, they would earn 20%, which is about $7,300.
And then just to add on to that, so once they, meet that contribution element, they'll have to be assessed with a care needs assessment and determined eligible at that point. So do they meet the care needs level criteria that we have for long-term care? And then once that's approved, it's, there isn't any secondary layer of approval for services. So once they've gotten that final eligibility determination, they're open to use any of the services that are offered under the program.
What happens to my care once I use my entire WACARE's benefit?
I think it would depend on, are you transitioning to Medicaid? Kind of like we touched on, you would have to consider, what type of services or provider types Medicaid might cover. It is planning, and there are resources, I believe, like on our website and things we're working on internally to support folks with those transitions, that once you do exhaust the benefit, that there's kind of a warm handoff, if you will, to continued services that'll meet your needs. I don't know if anyone else has anything else to add to that, but yeah, it would be something to be planful of. Yeah, sorry, Sam.
No, you're okay. Is a spouse able to become a paid caregiver?
Yes, with WACARE's benefit, yes. Spouse and registered domestic partner.
Sebastian, this one's probably for you. It looks like there's still some confusion around the pathways. Can you go over those again?
Yeah, and it might be helpful for me to go back to that slide real quick because I know the visual for me helps a lot. So sorry to go through these quickly, but just to get to that one. Let's see, and it was towards the beginning. There we go. So I just mentioned the transition pathway on the right-hand side, but there's also the permanent, right, and the temporary pathway. So someone can qualify, someone who's contributed for at least 10 years at any point in their career, right? Again, working at least 500 hours per calendar year will qualify for the permanent pathway, again, earning them the full benefit amount of $36,500, which is adjusted for inflation annually. Then we have the temporary pathway. So someone who has contributed 3 out of the last 6 years at the time that they apply for benefits, right, can earn the full benefit amount. Let's say someone who has maybe more of an emergency, right, or something where they have a sudden care need, then they'll be able to access that pathway. And then additionally, right, anyone who qualifies for the transition pathway that I mentioned earlier, they can also qualify for one of the other pathways if they continue to contribute.
Thanks, Sebastian. Christine, are you able to go over the difference between the two rates again? Between the two rates, there's a few questions in here about the differences.
Sure, yeah. So CDWA will be able to offer folks 2 different rates. We're going to have a standard rate, and that will be eligible to, or available, excuse me, to all IPs. So any beneficiary hiring an IP, they'll all be eligible for that standard rate. And what that standard rate covers is the gamut. It covers the same types of things that it covers over in Medicaid. So we've got healthcare insurance, retirement benefits, overtime costs, the training costs, so that's built into the rate. So there are several things that are part of that standard rate that benefit the caregiver and go to supporting just, their services. So that's the standard rate. There are no limitations on hours, like how many hours a beneficiary might need an IP to provide care, or there's no restriction on, again, like family, like relationship. So whether you're related or not. The family rate, so there are some limitations there, kind of restrictions around it of who, is eligible, what beneficiaries are eligible to use that rate. They do have to have a family member. So again, back to the definition that Chantel gave us early on of being related by marriage or by blood, or, spousal or domestic partner relative. They are eligible for this rate, and that rate, it's a reduced rate. It's a bit of a lower rate, recognizing that a lot of our family caregivers are already employed potentially, so they, may already have an employer who provides benefits, union membership, things like that. Well, that's not, but so that reduced rate, the IP will not be eligible for healthcare benefits, retirement benefits, and the overtime is not built into that rate because it's a reduced hours of 20, or it's under 20 hours that the family caregiver would have to work. So we were able to work that out for family caregivers choosing the CDWA route that, maybe are only going to work a few hours a week for their loved one.
Thank you. Are IPs required to join the union? Join a union?
Yeah, so CDWA is unionized. They've got a collective bargaining agreement with SEIU 775. There are stipulations, I believe, in that collective bargaining agreement that IPs could opt out if they meet the criteria, but otherwise, yes, they would be.
Will IPs need to complete an electronic visit verification for each shift, like in Medicaid?
So the shift tracking with CDWA is going to be different than it is in Medicaid. So EVV is not a requirement under the WA Cares Fund program.
Is the 36,500 a full benefit amount? Like a one-time benefit amount? Sebastian, you might be able to answer.
So the $36,500 is a lifetime benefit amount. Yes.
I think that's all of the time that we have for today. I dropped in the chat a link to our contact form. If we didn't answer your question during today's webinar, or you have additional questions, you can email us through the contact form and we'll respond to you directly there. I also added in chat registration links to our upcoming webinars. We have 4 more webinars between now and the end of the year. If you have specific questions or interests in any of the topics, you can register. We have WA Cares Basics for Providers, a spotlight on the WA Cares Care Needs Assessment and process there, a deep dive on benefits and what you can use your benefits on, and a spotlight on care options. As soon as you leave the webinar today and close out of it, a survey will automatically appear on your screen. We would love to hear from you, and we would appreciate if you could take a few minutes to share your thoughts about today's presentation. And then, as a reminder, today's webinar is recorded and it will be available on our website within 24 hours. The recording and the slides will be available, and all of the translations. If you have any questions, again, you can contact us through the form on our website or call us at the number, next slide, listed on your screen. We also have social media that you can connect with us on. Thank you all for attending today, and have a great day.